Welcome and thanks for joining us for this session of the Cloud Exchange. My guest is Steve Boberski, the Public Sector Chief Technology Officer at Genesys. Steve, thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
Thanks for having me.
As we continue our conversation about customer experience in the cloud and how the two things fit together, we know that the administration is a big push around customer experience, and they're not going to find a lot of success without, quote unquote, the cloud. So that's where I'm going to start with, is what is the role from Genesys' perspective about how the cloud and customer service fit together?
Well, there are a number of advantages from using a cloud model versus a traditional premises version. But certainly, from a customer experience perspective, having reach back, right? We're FedRAMP authorized. A number of solutions in the community, obviously serving the federal government, are FedRAMP authorized, and that creates an ecosystem and an infrastructure of technology that allows us to present best-of-breed options, right? We have a complete portfolio of technology, but we lean heavily on our partners to augment that portfolio for a number of features. And with the cloud, the ability to reach into all of those partners directly to provide the services for the customer without them having to have that expertise or download something or have local equipment on premises is really, really important. So it's one of the most.
Do you get a sense that agencies understand the intersection between cloud and customer experience when you have your conversations with them? What are some of the questions you get from them, or what's some of the conversations like?
Well, I don't know that they are drawing a cloud line for customer experience per se. There's a mandate to move to the cloud for the federal government. There's a mandate to improve customer experience. They understand that most technology is available today through the cloud, and that kind of drives them down that road. But when we have the conversation, it starts out with the security conversation, which is what are the challenges, but also what are the advantages of using a secure cloud solution, which is people don't understand. You move something, especially customer experience, which touches so many things, right? There are databases, where you're having a lot of important information, or sometimes what's called PII, personally identifiable information, or sensitive information, right? And that it's treated accordingly, right? And they want to know they're secure when it's in the cloud.
I'm glad you bring up security, because I think that's a key feature when we talk about cloud. And you mentioned FedRAMP, which every cloud has to be. There's other pieces too beyond the security. Once they get past that security question, right. Is they're also saying, okay, well, we can also, I'll use the term connect the dots better. Are they asking questions about, well, how can I pull data? What's the API strategy?
Absolutely, absolutely. So a lot of interagency operations available now because they're all cloud-based and can reach back through a common infrastructure. But when you talk about certain agencies that have surge requirements or on-demand growth for an emergency or a specific situation or seasonal growth rates, and they want to use other facilities that are other than their own, to be able to reach into the cloud from another agency's desktop in an emergency and just seat personnel there without having to roll out additional equipment, new clients, that kind of thing. The flexibility you get with cloud, the ability that your traffic's going to be automatically rerouted and you're not worried about a single point of failure anymore. All of the advantages from stability and availability really start changing the game of how they approach the technology, and also the reach that they have, right? So you can get to it from almost anywhere.
There's probably no agency that doesn't have that surge capability. I mean, we always talk about the IRS as an example, or HHS with healthcare.gov. Those are easy examples. Student aid, we're just about to,
right.
School year's starting up. A lot of people probably started with student aid earlier this year, but I think every agency probably has that. Does having that ability to have that flexibility and agility mean more for customer experience? It improves the customer service. It expands how you can provide it, and it creates almost the feeling of, oh, they understand my needs.
It does, and the flexibility. When you're talking about an emergency response agency or someone that's handing out money or responsible for doling out money during their response, these are critical functions that people want to reach from anywhere at any time. Knowing that those services can scale immediately, the citizens are more confident. It does build that trust. They're not waiting on hold forever anymore. You can dynamically add resources from anywhere to do that. That's a big advantage for the agencies in the customer experience model, right? And now, as they move to the cloud, it's important that they keep track of where these assets are, and they do employ the technology that's required to do the analytics and derive the value out of it. But the cloud, the flexibility and availability and stability, those three things are what drives everybody to improve. They can now focus on customer experience instead of the infrastructure behind it, right? Because we got that.
You mentioned building trust, and I think that's another piece to this, is when you talk about what the cloud can do for an agency as they improve customer experience, it's also the empathy. And you spoke about empathy just recently, so maybe talk a little bit about that piece and how connect the dots between empathy, cloud, and customer experience.
Sure. So, everybody, when they do their contact center or customer experience board, there's a mandate to build that trust. And all agencies that I've spoken to, they were already driving that bus. They're just excited now that it's prioritized, right? So now I have an excuse to move it to the front of the line, which is great, right? But how do they do that, and what do they do? We pitch empathy, and we've seen the government understanding that introducing empathy into the customer experience and focusing on the customer and that relationship rather than the metrics that go with it, which is I want to improve customer experience by reducing call handling time and reducing wait times. Well, that's a laudable goal, right? But how do you do that? We've found that if you focus on empathy, on the person's journey, and we do that, we talk about journey mapping all the time, which is I can tell where the customer has been and where they're going or what they want to do. And by the time they arrive at the agent's desktop, the agent knows what that person's been trying to do. So rather than, hi, how can I help you today? What have you done? Well, I've done this. Oh, did you try this? I know where they've been. The agent now can see easily in front of them everything they tried to do, so they can say, oh, I see you've tried to use the website to go somewhere and you're having trouble. How can I help? That empathetic moment is such a big deal because I, as the caller, now realize that I don't have to just explain what I just did for the last 9 hours or 9 days trying to get in. They know, they're ready to help. They know who I am. Very exciting. And the agent, the employee experience is just as important for this empathy because the employee or the agent for the government doesn't have to play 20 questions and interrogate the caller, right? And it's like, I know what you need and I'm here to help. That instant connection, it's going to lead to all the metrics you want to see, right? It's going to lead to decreased handling times, call handling, because they're not wasting all that time asking questions, trying to figure out what they want. It's going to lead to a better satisfactory experience for the caller and for the agent, which means retention is higher on the federal side, right? Knowledge management becomes less of a challenge. Training's and all that money you save because call handling times are going down, experience is going up, can be reapplied to either expanding the portfolio if you want to add more analytics or to, hey, let's take the next step in our customer experience journey technologically, or go find another gap and fill it. Like, let's focus on the web page, right? Whatever you need to do, right? We're excited to be part of that journey, but we think that introducing and focusing on empathy at both the employee and the caller side is probably the most expedient way to do it. And the cloud enables all this just because, again, the tools are available regardless of where they are.
There's probably nothing more frustrating than when they say, please enter your birth date so we know, and then you enter it and then they go, the first thing they ask you is, what's your birth date? You're like,
right.
Why did I, that doesn't create the opposite of empathy, it creates frustration.
It does. It does.
Are agencies understanding how to create empathy, or is that what the kind of questions you're answering when you meet with your government clients? You're explaining to them, here's the pieces and parts, and okay, and that clicks. Do you see that click?
Well, I would say it has clicked. We're seeing a lot of the agencies come out. There are proposals on the street right now specifically focusing on journey mapping and how to address introducing empathy. The industry is moving in that direction. We've been driving this bus as much as we can, but the government is now on board, right? The GSA's Customer Experience Center of Excellence has grown significantly and is being used heavily. We're seeing a lot of proposals that are focusing on the advanced analytics part of the journey mapping and trying to understand where they're at now, because the biggest challenge of any technology journey is you can't know where you need to go if you don't know where you are. And sometimes grabbing analytics first and starting to do, well, here's what I have and how can I look at it today will help guide that journey and still improve the experience as you go. So one of the cool things about cloud in general is I don't have to buy a ton of licenses and then maybe I'll only use part of it. You pay for what you use, and you can start taking the pieces you need. So maybe one agency specifically wants to focus on journey mapping, and we could put a front end on that. Maybe they want to add multi-channel, but they have to change the way one of them is delivered, and they don't have any metrics to see how successful that is. So they can pick and choose. They don't have to lift and shift the entire portfolio to the cloud, which is kind of nice.
I know journey mapping has been a big focus for the Biden administration. We heard earlier in the Cloud Exchange from Claire Monterano, the federal CIO, who talked about journey mapping probably quite a bit as it relates to customer experience. The other side of it is the employees themselves, right. the federal employees. I think it's important that we touch upon them and how the cloud impacts them and their ability to meet mission. It's not just, hey, how do I make your life easier for the citizen? It's also how to make it easier for the employee.
100%. And as I mentioned earlier, obviously them having more information on the caller as they arrive reduces stress and makes them happier. But there's so many other advantages that have come from cloud customer experience. Some of it was driven by COVID, of course, but the remote worker concept was always a nice to have. It was people were pushing it. There's a carbon footprint initiative, or whatever, reduce office costs, right? But then it was imperative, right? But some of the benefits we've seen come out of this, I spoke about this once before, which is State of Alaska. Great opportunity to optimize their contact center, introduce a plethora of new technologies to improve the citizen journey and experience across the board, but also they now had reach to demographically to employees that they couldn't reach before. So now, with such a large and diverse demographic in the state of Alaska, they were now able to hire people from specific groups or different groups they could never they could never reach before. So now there was better representation of the general population for agents that were, that were being reached into, which was what a great find, right? And so a better experience across the board.
And nobody wants to go out in that Alaskan winter if you can stay at home and do a little bit of contact center work there.
Absolutely, right? And that's just one example, but it's certainly remote work. Just as we could spend everybody has, right? Spend hours on remote work and the advantages, but how the cloud and customer experience model has been driven with the remote work side by side, security became an issue. And I've got people at home and, surfing the internet maybe on that machine. How do I handle that? All those derivative questions have all been addressed. So it really, a lot was driven forward. But because the cloud was already an initiative and there was already so much infrastructure out there, what was available it was a really, if COVID had occurred even 4 years earlier, it would have been a completely different story. You were talking about VPN burdens,
Or if it was in the 80s, we'd all be watching our VCRs.
Oh, yeah.
Steve, we're just about out of time. What's the big takeaway? Give me the one big takeaway for our audience from customer experience in cloud and how they react. What do you want to make sure they know?
I certainly wanted to understand, obviously, the Genesys is here to help. But,
of course. Yeah.
But, I think what's really important we want to understand is the journey doesn't, everybody's at a different point in their journey. And, that old, saw of, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time. You do not need to lift and shift your entire infrastructure. You do not need to redo the entire contact. We're happy to help you do that if you need to. But look, let's sit down. And the other thing I really want that's important is technology for technology's sake is done, right? But a lot of agents still have a habit. Here's what I have. I need that to be moved to the cloud. Stop transition. We're focusing on transformation, right? So business functions beget functional requirements. Functional requirements, we got technical requirements, not the other way around. So let's sit down, look at the business again. What are your business requirements? What are the functional requirements? And you know what? Some of the technology, you might have been doing it that way because it's the only way to do it. Now you can do it differently. So, think about transformation. It can be done.
All right, good advice. And unfortunately, we are out of time for this session of the Cloud Exchange. So let me thank my guest. Steve Boberski is the Public Sector Chief Technology Officer at Genesys. Steve, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to Federal News Network. Now let me send you back to the studio for more from the Cloud Exchange.